What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Mosh Pit Reviews, where yours truly, Thrash Maniac 99, reviews metal albums in the calendar year of 2019. Now, for this episode, I'm going to be talking about, it's kind of fitting how the past episode we did on Slipknot last week. This week, we're reviewing another very popular band, and that's Killswitch Engage and their new album, Atonement. Now, of course, quick history lesson of Killswitch Engage for all you guys who have been living under a rock for almost 20 years. Killswitch Engage formed in 1999 out of Massachusetts, and they started out pretty much helping to pioneer the melodic metalcore sound that America became pretty popular for throughout the 2000s. It basically became the genre that took over metal in America after nu metal died down in the early 2000s, and then after that, metalcore became the big thing for popular music, in terms of heavy metal, that is. And of course, Killswitch takes cues from quite a few different places. They take influence from the New York hardcore scene. We're talking bands like Agnostic Front, Cro-Mags, etc. The Bay Area thrash metal scene, Metallica, Testament, Exodus, and the Gothenburg melodic death metal scene of At the Gates, In Flames, Stark Tranquility, and basically blend them together into a melting pot, and that's how you get Killswitch Engage, or metalcore as a whole from the melodic perspective, whereas the original metalcore sound was just more a continuation of the crossover thrash genre, but with a lot more extremity on top of it. So, Killswitch, over the course of the past nearly 20 years, have been putting out albums, their first couple of ones with Jesse Leach on vocals, and then after Alive or Still Breathing, ended up getting Howard Jones on probably their three biggest albums, End of Heartache, As Daylight Dies, and their second self-titled album. Then after Howard Jones left the band due to illness, they got Jesse Leach back into the band for their 2013 album, which I can't remember the title of it off the top of my head. Then they put out Disincarnate back in 2016, and now here we are at Atonement. So this is the third straight album with Jesse Leach back in the band. So, how does it stack up? Well, the first track, Unleashed, if you ask me, was probably the weakest song of the album, mainly because while there was some great melody on this track, when you hear the beginning, the breakdowns, and this is kind of a big criticism a lot of people, I think, have with that melodic metalcore style of Killswitch, As They Lay Dying, Unearth, etc., is that some of the breakdowns don't have enough riffiness to them, and this is a prime example of how bland metalcore can be, because in the beginning you get that breakdown, just a few chugging lines, and that's really it, despite the second part of the breakdown having the great melodic vocals of Jesse. To me, it just, the breakdowns and the lack of notes just kind of took me out of the song a little bit. Thankfully, we get to the second track, The Signal Fire, where Howard Jones makes a guest appearance on the song, and it's a pretty aggressive tune, and I'll talk more about that when we get to the end of the review. Us Against the World is kind of a typical Killswitch Engage, like, motivator kind of song. I mean, then again, Killswitch has been known to have motivation-inspired lyrics, even some depressive stuff, but maybe not to the type of depression that other bands have done. Perhaps, say, I don't know, Opeth, in the vein of songs like Burden, where it was a very depressive song, but that's Opeth. We're talking about Killswitch. The Crownless King featuring Chuck Billy from Testament on vocals, which was really interesting choice, and this was another one of those very, very heavy and aggressive tracks. The shortest song in the album, I Am Broken Too, which was their ballad on the album. Kind of a risky move, making the shortest song of the album the ballad song, and to be honest, When it comes to Killswitch ballads, this is definitely one of the weakest that they've ever done. It doesn't hold a candle to songs like Always, End of Heartache. You can't really do it. And that's just me. And then we get to the second half of the album where we really start getting the traditional Killswitch Engage sound. Songs such as Sure as the Sun Will Rise, Take Control, and Ravenous with that C tuning that Killswitch had pretty much been using throughout their entire career. While those songs weren't bad, to me, they just felt kind of samey to me. And that's sort of been a problem with Killswitch over the course of the last couple of albums. Apart from their 2013 album, they just kind of recycle ideas and trying to see what would work, and most of it didn't quite work here. I Can't Be the Only One, kind of another one of those ballady type songs with heavy parts. But Bite the Hand That Feeds, the closing track of the album, the longest track of the album, another very aggressive song, and it was probably the most thrashy of the album, and that's the part of metalcore I like, is when it gets a little more thrashy, a little more death metal oriented. When it gets too much into the breakdowns and too much of the melodic singing within metalcore, that's where I kind of lose the plot a little bit. So overall, top to bottom. Now, another point I forgot to mention with this album, this is their first one on Metal Blade after they had been on Roadrunner for many years. They go to Metal Blade, which was an interesting choice for Brian Slagel to pick up one of the biggest bands within modern metal today. But going back to the two guest appearance songs, the Signal Fire and the Crownless King, with Howard and Chuck, Howard Jones and Chuck Billy from Testament, they had such a huge opportunity to really showcase stuff on those tracks. While those were two solid songs on the album, to me, I felt they would have benefited if Howard and Chuck got to do more melodic singing rather than just growling or screams. Because after all, Howard Jones, part of the reason why I felt Killswitch got as big as they did in the mid to late 2000s was because of the insane vocal style of Howard Jones, being able to sing cleanly in a high and a low end and have a brutal gruff voice to him. And I felt like that was part of what gave Killswitch their identity in their boom period in the mid to late 2000s. Nothing against Jesse Leach, he's a very good vocalist in his own right, but to me, Killswitch just wasn't the same after Howard left the band. Would have been nice to hear like a melodic duet with Howard and Jesse on that song, but it didn't happen. We got more of a growling duet, which wasn't terrible, but I would have loved to have heard more melody on that song in terms of the vocals. Same with Chuck Billy's track, The Crownless King. He's showing definitely that he's got a really good growl, and he's got one of the best growls within the thrash metal world, but I would have loved to have heard his melodic voice on this song, because he's got, in my opinion, one of the best melodic vocals in thrash. Would have loved to have heard that, but we didn't get that, unfortunately. So overall, from top to bottom, there was some highlights on the album. The two guest appearance tracks, the closing track. But apart from that, to me, Killswitch Engage album quality is starting to go downhill. I thought Disincarnate wasn't terrible back in 2016, but that's an album that I really haven't gone back to. Which should kind of go to show you the longevity that album really had. This album kind of follows that same trope. On top of that, you had a few songs that just were recycled and just did not work, and to me that's sort of the problem with a lot of modern metalcore bands, unless they're trying to do new things, which there were some attempts here on this album, I will give them that. I Am Broken 2 being the shortest song of the album, being the ballad song. Huge risk, to me, didn't quite pay off as much as some other people would have wanted it to. So really, this was an album that I felt was very underwhelming, even for Killswitch Engage standards. I really feel like this is an album where the band perhaps needs to take a look at themselves and think, okay, what made us good back in the mid to late 2000s, songwriting-wise? We need to get back to that, but try and build off of it and actually do new things with it. Instead of just taking similar ideas from the past and just, like it's spaghetti, and you just throw it on the wall to see what stick. And not a lot of it stuck, in my opinion. This album, while not a terrible album, it's a decent enough album, but to me would have benefited if the band had improved upon the songwriting, as well as allowed for Howard and Chuck to really showcase their melodic range a little more. So for that reason, I'm going to give this album a 22 out of 40. It's not a bad album by any means, but not that great either, and that's just... As Twitter goes off, I'm sorry, but that's just my opinion. But what do you guys think of Atonement by Killswitch Engage? Let me know in the comments below. I'm gonna have a poll come up here soon for which album coming out this upcoming week you guys want to see the solo review video for. If you guys want to see other reviews for albums, go follow me on Twitter, @ThrashManiac99. I might do some here this week, like for Devourment, for Hammerfall, and a bunch of others. But until next time, peace out, and I will see you very soon. And I know Hannah, I know her opinion about this, but I'm sorry. Number 4, Ghost prequel.
Screw you! Screw you! Die! Die! Okay.
Get out of here!
No, I cannot continue.
Now she's
Okay.
gone.
Hannah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna probably. That's my number 3 request.
You have no idea about music.
Okay.